We'll be filming it predictions up for 9 games of week 14 of this college football season. So starting with the Egg Bowl. So this game, of course, means a lot to me as an Ole Miss fan, no matter how good the two teams are. And this season is the farthest apart these two teams have been that I've ever seen with how good they are. Ole Miss is really a better team than you would think they are looking at their record. And Mississippi State is just a pile of garbage. Even I was too high on them. I picked them to go 3-9, winless in the SEC, beating the three little teams on their schedule. But it turns out they're going to go 2-10, winless in the SEC because they got blown out by one of the little teams on their schedule. Ole Miss's defense is so much better than theirs is. Uh, Ole Miss has one of the best defenses in the country, and Mississippi State has one of the worst defenses in the country. Mississippi State has given up 30 plus points in 9 games this season. Their defense ranks 122nd in points allowed per game. Mississippi State is the worst team in the SEC by far this season, and they have the worst defense in the SEC this season. Their offense is a little better this year, and I do like Jeff Lebby as an offensive coordinator, but it's not going to matter against this Ole Miss defense. Ole Miss will dominate Mississippi State, I think, at the line of scrimmage on both sides. And Ole Miss, I don't think will have any trouble scoring in this game. And Trey Harris, I did see probably won't play in this game. And of course, I wish he was able to play, but it's not going to matter in this game. Ole Miss has a huge quarterback advantage and a huge coaching advantage, and they've got so much more talent at the wide receiver position. Even without Trey Harris. So Ole Miss, I think, is going to win this game by 30. I've got Ole Miss getting the win, 44-14 over Mississippi State, and now Georgia Tech at Georgia. So Georgia Tech is at 7-4 this season. They're a decent team, and with Georgia having been an inconsistent team this season, I wouldn't be surprised if this game ended up being pretty close. But Georgia's not going to lose it; they're just too talented. And Georgia Tech's defense has been better this year than last year. It's been okay, but Georgia, even though they probably won't score 40 in this game, they're going to score plenty. And Georgia Tech depends more on their run game offensively, and that's the biggest strength of Georgia's defense. I think Georgia will slow down Georgia Tech's run game to where Georgia Tech will not score very much in this game. And Georgia does have some injuries on offense, and I don't know if any of those players will play or not. Kirby Smart is so secretive about these kinds of things. They're questionable to play. I saw Trevor Etienne, their starting running back, had a rib injury and has missed the last 2 games. And one of their best receivers, Dylan Bell, had an ankle injury against Tennessee and missed last week's game. And then one of their other receivers, Colby Young, has missed a lot of this season because of a suspension. But whether these players play or not won't matter in this game, but they could matter a lot in the SEC championship game. But I've got Georgia getting the win fairly easily, 31-14 over Georgia Tech. And now up Michigan at Ohio State. So Michigan played their best offensively of all season. last week when they scored 50 points, but that was just against Northwestern, who's a horrible team, and Ohio State's defense, is the best in the country, and with Michigan's offense having struggled pretty much all season. That makes me think that Michigan is going to struggle not just to score points, but to move the ball on Ohio State. Ohio State's defensive line, I think, will win the battle pretty easily with Michigan's offensive line. And Michigan, just has their running backs and the tight end on offense. And I think Ohio State will be able to shut down Michigan's run game. And Ohio State has a big quarterback advantage over Michigan, and they've got so much more talent at the wide receiver position. The only possible concern for Ohio State in this game would be their offensive line. It does have some injuries, and Michigan's starting defensive line is really good. But Ohio State's offensive line played fine against Indiana last week, who's got a defensive line that's pretty good too. And Michigan's defense is still solid, so I don't think Ohio State's going to score 40 in this game. But I don't think Michigan's going to be able to hold Ohio State down like they've been able to the past three meetings. Michigan's defense isn't near as deep as it was last year. I think Ohio State may have to play them 4 quarters, uh, but Michigan, I think, will get tired. Ohio State will just be too much for them, and they will pull away in the fourth quarter and finally get their revenge on Michigan. And actually think that they're going to blow them out. I've got Ohio State getting the win, 34 to 13 over Michigan, and now South Carolina at Clemson. Clemson's defense this year is not as good as it's usually been. It's actually about an average defense only. South Carolina's got a better defense than Clemson does, I think. Clemson's secondary is not that good, and South Carolina's secondary is good. Now, Clemson's front seven's got some really good players. They've got T.J. Parker and Peter Woods on the defensive line that are really good players, and then Barrett Carter at linebacker, who's really good. But South Carolina's got some really good players in their front seven too. Kyle Kennard and Dylan Stewart on the defensive line, and Debo Williams at linebacker. Those are some of the SEC's best defensive players. And Clemson offensively, Maffa is a great running back, but Rocket Sanders at South Carolina's running back, I think, is about as good as him. And Antonio Williams is a good receiver for Clemson, but Klubnik is an overrated quarterback, I think. And uh, Klubnik, I think, is a little better passer than Lenora Sellers is, but Sellers is a better runner than Klubnik is. And Clemson's offensive line just is not that good still, and South Carolina's is a lot better than it was last year. And I was wrong by a lot on South Carolina this year. They're actually a pretty good team, and I think they're going to pull the upset and go on the road and beat Clemson in a close one. I've got South Carolina getting the win, 31 to 28 over Clemson. So now Notre Dame at Southern uh, Cal. So Southern Cal, I think, is playing the wrong quarterback. This that Jaden Mayava only had a 54.3% completion against UCLA. And Southern Cal, of course, does have some good receivers, and Woody Marks is one of the best running backs in the Big Ten with 1,100 rushing yards this season. But Notre Dame's defensive line is really good, and Southern Cal's offensive line is really bad. And I think Notre Dame's defensive line is going to dominate them and slow down Southern Cal's run game, and I don't think Southern Cal is going to be able to score very much in this game. Southern Cal's defense is much better this year, and their defensive line is a lot better. So Notre Dame's offensive line probably won't dominate them, but I do think Notre Dame is the more physical uh, team. And Notre Dame's defense ranked second in the country in points given up. Only giving up 11.6 points per game. And Notre Dame is one of the best rushing teams in the country. They've got two great running backs with Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price. Even though Riley Leonard hasn't been great for them at quarterback this season. So I don't think that this is going to be a blowout. I don't think Notre Dame is going to score a ton, but I do think it'll probably be close for at least three quarters. But I think that Notre Dame will pull away and win by a couple of scores. I've got Notre Dame getting the win 30-17 over at Southern Cal. And now the Iron Bowl. If Alabama plays like they did last week, and Auburn plays like they did last week, Alabama will lose the game. That is concerning for Alabama, but I think Alabama will play better on both sides of the ball this week. I think because it's the Iron Bowl, they will be ready. But I do think Alabama dominating the Iron Bowl in Tuscaloosa will come to an end this year, and I think it'll be a close up four quarter game. And I think Auburn's defense is good enough to probably hold Alabama under 30 points, but Auburn's offense is not actually very good this year. And I think at the end of the game, the talent of Alabama will be enough to get them the win this time. I've got Alabama winning 24-21 against Auburn, and now Texas at Texas A&M. So Texas right now seems to be playing a lot better than Texas A&M has, but because it's a rivalry game coming back and the games at A&M, I do expect this to be a one-score game. So Texas A&M, I do think, is playing the wrong quarterback right now. I think Hunter Wayman is a better passer than Marcel Reed is, even though Marcel Reed is a better runner. But Quinn Ewers is a better quarterback than either one of them are. And Texas A&M's defense is about as talented as Texas is, but lately they've not been playing like it. When they gave up 44 points to South Carolina and then gave up 31 in regulation to a struggling Auburn offense, and Texas's defense has stayed dominant. And Texas A&M, I don't think will be able to win this one, even though A&M is a tough place to play. I think Texas's offensive line is much better than theirs is. I've got Texas getting the win 27-20 over at Texas A&M. So now Oklahoma at LSU. So LSU's offense is nothing like last year's, and I think Oklahoma's defense will be able to do a good job at stopping them. I don't think they'll do as well as they did against Alabama, but I do think they'll at least be able to hold LSU down into the low 20s. Now LSU does have some dangerous wide receivers, and Oklahoma wide receivers are all going to be out again. Their best ones are. But LSU struggled badly with the quarterback run against Alabama and against Texas A&M, and I think Oklahoma can score enough on them to win this game with the quarterback run uh, because Jackson Arnold did that well against Alabama. And so I've got Oklahoma getting the win in this game at 23 to 20. And for the last one, Washington at Oregon. So Washington does have one really good running back, Jonah Coleman, one of the best running backs in the Big Ten, who has over 1,000 yards rushing this season. But the only way I see Oregon possibly losing this game is if they play as bad offensively as they did against Wisconsin. And even if they do play that bad, I still don't think they're going to lose this game because uh, Newman is the strength of Washington's offense. And if they're able to shut him down, Washington probably isn't going to score hardly anything in this game. Washington's offensive line isn't great, and Oregon's defensive line is top three in the country. I think they'll dominate the Washington offensive line and slow down Coleman. And for example, when Washington went against Penn State, who has a really good defensive line, Coleman only had 24 yards and averaged only 2.2 yards a carry, and Washington only scored 6 points. And Oregon's defensive line, I think, is even better than Penn State's is. And Oregon, the offense is going to get back their best receiver most likely for this game, Tez Johnson, who hasn't played at all in the last two games. Now, Oregon's best defensive lineman, Jordan Birch, is questionable to play in this game. And of course, it won't matter, I don't think, in this one, but for the Big Ten championship, they will need Birch back in there. And Washington's defense, if you look at the numbers, it's not been horrible, but they did give up 40 points to Iowa and 35 points to Penn State. And I know Iowa's offense is better this year, and Penn State's is solid, but those aren't great offensive teams. Oregon's offense is way more talented, and Oregon's offensive line, I think, is going to dominate Washington's defensive line, and I think they'll be able to score quite a bit in this game. So I've got Oregon getting the win 35-6 over Washington. So that will be it with this video. Please subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll be back soon.